Nubian Queens in the Nile Valley, and Afro-Asiatic cultural history. The Candaces of Meroe, Meroitic Hidigo, meaning great woman, have inspired more curiosity or legend than systematic cultural historical study since they entered world history through Strabo's account of the one-eyed Candace in 23 BCE in his geography. Biblical references not only to a Candace, New Testament Acts 8:26-1, but also to the account of the Queen of Sheba's visit to King Solomon in Jerusalem, Book of Chronicles 2:9, have served to add adventure and romance to the legendary queens of the East. The fabled Al-Kahina, queen of the Berbers, who staved off the Arab invasion of the Maghreb from 693-98 CE when she was killed defending her homeland, is the subject of such legend for her cunning and military prowess that she has multiple identities depending upon the source. She is variously referred to as the Queen of the Hours, mountains among the Berbers, the Queen of Ifriqiya and the Maghreb among the Arabs, a Berber Deborah in Jewish accounts, and sponsor of the last heroic resistance to the Arabs by French scholars. So diverse are the accounts of her exploits that she is now a subject of historiographical analysis. Add to these the legends and historical traditions from North Africa, across the Sahel and West Africa, of women who founded cities, led migrations, or conquered kingdoms. Among these, for example, can counted the queens of Songhai, Amina of Katsina, 15th century, and Bazau Turunku, Queen Asbite of the Garamantes.
Alyssa Dido, N., the Phoenician princess and founder of the city of Carthage, 980 BCE. The Tuareg leader Nugameth al-Tarkiya, the star of the Tuareg archers in Arabic, who led an Almoravid siege of Valencia. Queen Zobeida, founder of the city of Tauris in Arabia in 800 AD. In modern times, past patterns continued with the Ashanti queen, Mother Ya Asantewa, who led several successful battles against British colonialism in 1900. Oral traditions of women as powerful figures or clever strategists in their roles as queens, as warrior queens, or as romantic figures have had great appeal in times past, and continue to do so in this present era of feminist or humanist interest in the subject. Survey of Afro-Asiatic ruling queens, regnant queens, those ruling in their own right, including women from kingdoms in Arabia and Southwest Asia, the northern tier of Africa, the Nile Valley, the Blue as well as White Niles, constitute a remarkable chapter in world history. For about 1,500 years, from the 10th century BCE to about the 5th century CE, an impressive number of ruling queens reigned. Among the Afro-Asiatic states of Southwest Asia and Northeast Africa, it was generally the less hegemonic states where ruling queens have prevailed. Hegemonic states include large-scale empires with major urban centers, extensive external trade, military and conquest relations with surrounding peoples, such as the Egyptian, Syrian, Babylonian, Greek, or Roman empires. While pharaonic Egypt boasts several regnant queens, of whom Hatshepsut and Cleopatra VII are the most famous, this record contrasts dramatically with the much longer Meroitic list of ruling queens. During 3,000+ years of history, 7 Egyptian queens are known to have ruled in their own right.
That is, they were more than merely queen consorts or queen mothers. By comparison, Meroe claims at least 10 regnant queens during the 500-year period between 260 BCE and 320 CE, and no fewer than 6 during the 140 period between 60 BC and 80 AD. Beyond this remarkable difference, the Meroitic queens were portrayed as women, often alone or in the forefront of their own stelae and sculptures, dressed in women's regal clothing, while Hatshepsut, the best known of the Egyptian female pharaohs, had herself portrayed as male to garner acceptance and to refer to herself as king, there being no word in Egyptian for ruling queen. Both Ethiopian and Yemenis claim the Queen of Shebu, who is known as Balkis in the Quran and in Arabic literature since the Himyarite kingdom of Saba ruled both areas. Her legend has overwhelmed all others in Jewish, Christian, and Islamic discourse. Less well known are the many queens who ruled in Arabia and in Ethiopia, probably Since her time, in one area of Arabia, there were no fewer than 5 regnant queens who ruled from Adumatu in the north, the contemporary city of Al-Jawf, in one remarkable century from 744-6 to 333 BCE, are devoted to the forgotten queens of Arabia and Arabia as a land of battle queens. Aisha, the youngest wife of the Prophet Muhammad, for example, distinguished herself in the famous Battle of the Camel. In 656 CE 34, Ach, where her troops seized Basra, but were eventually defeated by Ali in his drive for succession as Khalifa.
10 Ethiopia's long dynastic history was nonetheless non-hegemonic, limited primarily to the highlands. According to its own accounting, this history extends over 4 millennia, from 4470 BCE to 1973, the year of the overthrow, the last Menelik emperor, Haile Selassie. The chronological table of the sovereigns of Ethiopia, requested by C.F. Ray and conveyed to him by the Rastafari Haile Selassie in 1922, establishes the royal mythology and was translated as Adu, the Ethiopian king of kings. This official chronicle of the Ethiopian monarchy of dynastic succession descends from Menelik I, 957 BC, lunar calendar. Included 6 regnant queens, referred to as Kandaki, co-regency what appears to be a Kandaki line. The first is Nikauta Kandaki, 736, 41 BC, with 5 subsequent Kandaki line queens ruling between 332 BC to 50 AD. 21 queens are recorded as sole regent in the kingdom of Ethiopia until the 9th century CE, and several of these played critical roles in Ethiopian history. 3. The conquest of Meroe by the Aksumite king Ezana may well provide the historical fiction for the Ethiopian dynastic claim to the Nubian Kandakis, as well as their kings. However, the claim is noteworthy, for it incorporates these regnant queens as culturally compatible. Makeda, identified as the queen of Sheba in the Kebra Negast, is also identified as Kandut, or queen mother. These Kandakis could be derived from the Meroitic tradition, or be a later invention. Convergence or confusion of the Meroitic queens with the Ethiopian queens as Kendake has been noted by Vantini.
3 of the Ethiopian queens were central to significant turning points in dynastic history. 1, Makeda, queen of Saba, hence Sheba, who founded the Menelik dynasty that ruled until the overthrow of Haile Selassie in 1974. 2, Queen Ahewa, regal name Sophia, who made Christianity the official religion of the Ethiopian kingdom in 332 AD. And 3, Gudit, the Jewish queen who founded the rival Zagwe dynasty, 933-1253 CE, until the Amhara Solomonic line was restored, Quirin, 1992, 12-19. After Gudit, there were no other official regnant queens in the list of sovereigns. However, the Empress of Ethiopia at the time of Abyssinia's defense against Italian colonial ambitions in the 1930s was Queen Zaudita, the daughter of Menelik II. Some suggested cultural historical patterns. The following cultural historic patterns are suggested as possible points for further study and comparative analysis of regnant queens in Northeast Africa, including Nubia and Southwest Asia. Matrilineal succession of regents. Descent traced through a feminine line, mother to offspring. Queen mothers and other high-ranking women associated with matrilineal succession. C. Brother-sister co-regency, a feature of matrilineal succession. 2. Feminine origin myths, foundresses of cities and dynasties. 3. Warrior queens, women at the battlefield, lady of victory. Tradition 1. Matrilineality. Descent and inheritance traced through women has been a controversial subject in anthropology due to the fear that recognizing descent in the female line could lead to the false conclusion that female rule or matriarchy was the prevalent social system. This incorrect equating of matrilineal with matriarchy, made by Bachofen and his disciples, has long been resolved but it has left a legacy of suspicion about study of historical or contemporary matrilineal societies. In Ethiopia, the historical queens, such as Makeda, were presented as sole rulers in the Kebra Nagast, but it likely that they were co-rulers of the state, side by side with their sons or brothers. In this case, Makeda would have been co-regent with her son Menelik. There is a strong correlation between the reckoning of matrilineal descent and the presence of historically attested regnant queens. This is confirmed for Cushitic Meroitic civilization and for the Nubian Christian kingdoms in the Sudan until the coming of Islam, and may well have continued past the penetration of Islam in certain Sudanic kingdoms. In Kush Meroe, all queens and kings had to be born to a queen, usually the ruler's sister. They believed their father was the god Amun. Therefore, each regent was part divine and part human, with the queen providing the human link. Flowing from this fact is the very high ranking of the queen mother, an attested fact for Kush Meroe, which is underscored, for example, in the importance attached to the presence of Taharka's mother at his coronation.
One of the inscription of Taharka tells how he delayed his coronation until his mother could travel from Napata to Memphis to witness the ceremony. The queen mothers had royal titles. Taharka's mother was God's wife of Amun, and the mother of Tanutamun, the last king of the 25th dynasty, was known as Mistress of Kush. In biographies and texts of the ruling kings, the importance of the queen mother can be deduced as one of the most important figures in the Kushite state. According to Adams, this exalted role of the Kushite queen mother, with no counterpart in Egypt, is clearly associated with the rule of matrilineal descent, where the mother was also semi-divine progenitress, whereas the mother of the Egyptian pharaoh was merely mortal, since his succession and divinity came from his father. It is in the queen mothers that the source of the Candace tradition can be located. In the Nubian Christian period, 6th, 9th century CE, the queens and queen mothers were active in state government and were still referred to by the title Kandake. The law of succession for the kingdoms of Alwa and Dongola was matrilineal, and considerable intermarriage between the kingdoms took place. As late as 1290 AD, King Shemamum, fearing retribution for failing to deliver the backed presents, noted that he feared for his mother, his sister, and maternal aunt, who were held hostage at the Mamluk Sultan's palace. So he sent great presents so that they would be freed in Cairo. For it is the tradition that the Nubian kings be directed by women in state affairs, according to the Arab chronicler Ibn Abd al-Zahir. In 1600, Leo Africanus wrote in his travels to Nubia that they are governed by women, and they call their queen Gawa. Their principal city is Dangala, consisting of about 10,000 households. Matrilineal succession was the rule for Ethiopia, by legend beginning with Makeda Sheba, to whom it may have diffused through contact with. Jewish custom 4, or perhaps it was an ancient Greater Nile Valley custom that Ethiopia shared with Nubia, and in part with Pharaonic Egypt. Co-regency as a function of matrilineal descent. Another aspect of matrilineal succession is a related emphasis on the maternally related males, as brothers or uncles. In matrilineal kingdoms, this can manifest itself as co-regency. The custom of the joint regency of brother and sister is an ancient pattern well known in Egypt, Nubia, and Ethiopia. The 10th century Yemenite traveler Al-Hamdani, in describing his travels to the Zinj, the Abyssinians, the Beja, the Nuba, Ifriqiya, Al-Karawan, Numidia, and Ghana, commented in his Kitab Sifat al-Jazira that these lands are subject to the rule of a king and a queen, and that they are kindred from a common mother. In Meroe, the regent had to be born of a queen who was usually the ruler's sister. According to Kitchen, 1986, 150, at least 2 of Taharka's 5 wives were his sisters. Other brother-sister marriages in the royal family of Napata included Alara and Kasaka, Kashta and Pebatma, and Pianki, and 3 of his 5 wives. One of the well-known Meroitic queens, Amanitare, was portrayed with a co-regent, King Natakamani, who were husband and wife and may have been brother and sister. The co-regents were portrayed iconographically as parallel and symmetrical at Naka and Amara, with neither presented as sole ruler. King Natakamani holds the title Gor, while Queen Amanitare is Ketike, Kendake, translated as royal sister or wife of the king.
The Russian scholar Kobishkina, in analyzing the story of Makeda in the Ethiopian Kebranagas, Book of Kings, sees her more as a co-regent with her son Menelik, noting that ancient Ethiopian queens were co-regents with their sons or brothers, the queen being able to eclipse her co-ruler son only if he were very young. Also, according to the Kebranagas Makeda, Sheba modified strict female succession and rule, where only females reign, to one of male regency through females. She transmitted the throne to her son and decreed that from now on in Ethiopia, men will reign and women will not reign. Religious texts being a guide, but not precise history. After Makeda's decree, there were 12 queens listed as sovereigns in the official state chronicle, not including Zaudita, who reigned as empress in the 20th century. The possibility that co-regency as a function of matrilineal succession is a broader African cultural pattern is suggested by its presence in cases as distinct as the Shilluk, where brother-sister marriage was practiced in the royal line, and in Sudanese in post-Islamic kingdoms or sultanates. The Funj sultanates of Sinar, the first of the Islamic kingdoms of the Sudan, practiced matrilineal descent, possibly derived from the Nubian holy men who, with Blue Nile peoples, comprise the first Unsab lineage of Sinar. This continued through the Amaradunkas line until 1720 CE. The Sultanate of Darfur had a pattern of brother-sister rule which lasted from the Middle Ages until its defeat at British hands in 1916. The title of the ruling sister during the Middle Ages was Iya Bassi, who, after her brother, was above all other male officials and all women. For the documented cases described where there is a historical pattern of ruling queens and matrilineal succession. Few were hegemonic states with large empires to defend. On a global scale, matrilineal declined in the face of the modern nation state, and it was especially
assaulted by European colonialism. It is possible that matrilineal did not hold up well in the face of the ancient hegemonic states either, which explains why it is not as apparent in the great city-states and empires of Mesopotamia and is only weakly represented in pharaonic Egypt. It is telling that the rival but smaller states of Nubia expressed stronger patterns of matrilineal, which may provide one explanation of why the presentation of the few female pharaohs of Egypt is so different from the imposing womanly figures that were struck as images of the Kandakes. 2, feminine origin. Myths, foundresses of cities and dynasties. It has been already mentioned that Makeda was the founder of the Menelik dynasty in Ethiopia in the 9th century BCE, and that Gudit founded the rival Zawi Jewish dynasty in the 10th century CE. As the history of Kush Meroe becomes better known in the future, especially after the Meroitic script can be read and analyzed, perhaps some queens may be acknowledged as founders of dynasties. Al-Kahina, the Berber warrior queen, effectively founded the first Arab dynasty by sending her 2 sons to fight with the Arabs before her own imminent defeat and execution. The sons were then accepted and became the founders of the Confederation of the Berbers. The origin myth of the matrilineal Al-Hagar Tuareg is based upon the mythical queen Tin Hinan and her female companion Takama, either her sister or her vassal, each of whom became an ancestress of the respective noble camel breeding and vassal goat breeding branches of the Tuareg. An exploration of Nubian origin myths, given their matrilineal tendencies, might yield interesting comparative data regarding foundresses of regal lines or of cities. If we think of ancient queens as regents capable of raising and commanding armies, the idea of women as warriors or warrior queens is as credible warrior kings. In this light, they emerge as regents who may or may not have actually participated in battle like their male counterparts. There are accounts of women as battlefield combatants and as leaders of troops, and there are queens who are portrayed symbolically as warrior regents smiting enemies. Queen Shanaktiket, the first acknowledged Meroitic queen occupying the throne alone. Sige, 170, 150 BCE, is shown wearing the helmet crown of the regent in her mortuary chapel. And as captor of a bound group of 4 enemies, Queen Amanisha Heto is represented on the pylon of her funerary cult chapel in Bejarawiya. north as a triumphant warrior spearing her enemies and wearing a royal costume, which associates her with the Nubian warrior and hunter deities. A wall painting in Meroe of Queen Amanirenas, 1410 BCE, shows her with bow, arrows, and spear, holding by one hand a tethered group of 7 captives, reproduced in Yarbrough 1992-96. Bas-reliefs at Naka show Queen Amanitare and King Natakamani represented armed with 2 swords, smiting enemies, with pet lions attacking or terrorizing enemies. Of course, the best recorded case of a Meroitic queen directly confronting an enemy on the battlefield is that of the one-eyed Candace, thought to be Amanirenas, who personally commanded her generals to attack the Roman town of Syene, Aswan, in 25 BCE. And after the Roman retaliatory sacking of Napata, negotiated a peace treaty favorable to Meroe. In the face of such a record, it seems obvious that Meroitic queens were warrior queens, and they have been acknowledged as such. Vainig, 1978, Bolding, 1976, Turuk, 1990. Since the Nubians have been famous for their bowmanship, it is credible to imagine that Nubian women might be skilled with a bow and arrow. Balana culture cemeteries apparently contain graves of women buried with spearheads and archer thumb guards. Archaeologists have attributed male gender to graves containing such artifacts. Comparable graves of the Scythian women buried with spears, lances, bows, and arrows were originally sexed as male, but were subsequently determined by physical analysis to be female. Lady of Victory, cult. The Lady of Victory cult is recorded in multiple geographical areas in Southwest Asia, among the Arabs and Arab-influenced peoples after the coming of Islam, and it may be that it is a more ancient Bedouin tradition. Its first account appears as Hind al-Hunud, an enemy of Muhammad who opposed the Prophet on the battlefield, brandishing a sword, exhorting her menfolk to bravery. In later versions, some women of high social standing, in other accounts, a virgin would be placed within a portable Kaaba or sacred enclosure. And with her attendants, they would travel to the battlefield in sight of the warriors, singing songs of encouragement. The Lady of Victory, her hair flowing and her body partly exposed, embodied an appeal to valor and passion. The famous Sudanese heroine of the Sheikhiya resistance to the 1821 Turco-Egyptian invasion, Mihera bint Aboud, was renowned for her poetry and valor. As the men hesitated in the face of the large armies of the invaders, the Virgin Mihera mounted her camel and dressed in men's clothing, she exclaimed to the men, "Here we are, our clothes are for you." And the desired exhortation of male bravery was achieved. Her poetry describing this incident remains alive in northern Sudanese folk traditions, where she is revered as a patriot and hero to her people. Sultan Ali Dinar's sister and co-regent Taja exhorted him in Lady of Victory style while attempting to preserve the Sultanate of Darfur from British takeover in 1916 as late as 1915 in a battle between Ibn Saud and Ibn Rashid in the feudal struggle over what would become the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. A woman, breasts bared and hair flowing loose, rode along the front lines in Lady of Victory fashion, exhorting warriors to victory.